Hello, good morning. I'm sure you are doing great and I'm also doing very great. So it is your YouTube live session number 2. Yesterday we had session number 1 where we covered the basic concepts of costing, and today we are going to be covering again some very important pointers, like we are going to be covering 3 topics precisely: absorption costing and ABC along with their relationship. So in a question we will be discussing about what is absorption costing. We had already covered it yesterday, so it's kind of a revision for us. And how do we apply that in a question? Along with that, what is ABC? What are the pointers to be considering for ABC and how to apply that also in a question? Then next we would be also discussing about target costing, one of the very important areas to discuss. Okay, now as I say this, it really reminds me of one thing, that there is generally target costing is always a very hot favorite topic when it comes to your section A, as well as sometimes as a part in section B. And when I talk about this ABC, this is something that has been tested in section A as well as B as well as C. And I have always found students, sometimes they're getting mixed up. They do a mix-up of absorption also at some point. So today let's understand it very clearly with a lot of examples, that how to ensure that things don't get mixed up and how to do multiple questions, as well as to have a confidence in doing any question post you attend this session today. So let's quickly discuss these pointers. First, I am on absorption costing. Okay, so today these 3 topics are going to be discussed. Absorption costing we had touched upon in the last class. Okay, now quickly I will just tell you what are generally the steps that we apply in an absorption costing environment. Now as I say this, I want to make it absolutely clear to even MA students who may be watching this, that look, this is the area of your MA syllabus as well when it comes to absorption costing, your ABC and your target costing. Okay, so the areas are very similar for MA and PM both. Okay, now let's discuss this. So I think my screen is very clearly visible to all of you and my voice is also audible to all of you. In case of any queries or questions, you can always ping me in the chat box and I would take care of it. Okay, I would take care of your queries. Now, one thing that let's discuss here is absorption costing. In yesterday's session, we understood about absorption costing, and what did we understood? Guys, we understood that this is the cost that gets absorbed in the product cost. Yes, and it follows the full cost model. So it follows the full cost model, meaning to say that when we do inventory valuation, we will apply full cost to the inventory. Okay, so this is for absorption costing, a brief summary that we had covered. And how do we calculate the absorption costing principles and how do we apply it over the cost, over the product cost? How do we allocate, you can say allocate the overhead cost to the different products? So we allocate the overhead cost to the different products based on the, can you type it in the chat box? I've given you the first letter. Based on what do we allocate the overhead absorption cost in the to the product cost? Yes, you all got it correct. It is OAR, overhead absorption rate, right? And this we have calculated by using the labor rate or by using the machine hours. Clear? Now comes the next part, an extension to it. What if we have departments like In an organization, there is a production department. Let's say there are two production departments, P1, P2. There are service departments. Production departments are like assembly departments. Okay. Production departments are like my assembly departments, are like my other departments which are relating to your production activities. Okay, so now your handling departments. Now service department is, let's say, your S1 and S2. Okay, now what is S1 and S2? Unlike service departments, for example, your maintenance, for example, your canteen department. So basically all of these departments will be using some of the other overheads because they all are part of the same factory premises. So they would be using some of the rental expenses. They may be using some of the other electricity expenses, for example. So now when the overhead is being used by, or overhead is being used by all these departments, so ideally then what is the first step that I should do? We should first step do allocation. The first step that we should do is allocation, then apportionment, then reapportionment, and finally then we do absorption. Okay, so what does this mean? Okay, it basically means you will apportion the overheads to the respective departments. Let's say the two production departments are using a machinery, so that would be the machinery cost will be allocated to production departments. Okay, and then let's say there is a rent, like I gave you an example. So rent expense based on the floor area is being shared by service department also. So then in that case, for rent, all four will get a share. Correct. So like this, we will see the different overheads and we will do the allocations accordingly. Now, once you do apportionment of overhead, the first step is apportionment. The second step is doing the allocation. Okay, or sorry. First step is allocation, because we will allocate the overheads to the different departments. Okay, like I gave you the example. Second step is apportionment. Apportionment is that first step you allocate it to the different departments. Second step is, second step is that you will apportion the overheads based on the usage. So allocation means we allocated it to the departments P1, P2, let's say example, or broadly to the production and the service departments. Then finally we have to allocate them more, right? We have to apportion them more. So then we will apportion them on the basis of the usage of the floor area and the other factors. Right? For example, for rent we use floor area. For the other factors we may be using machine hours. For all the other factors, so we'll have different criteria to apportion it. Now let's say we have apportioned the overhead cost to P1, to P2, to S1, to S2. But ultimately, which department's cost will go to the product cost? Correct? Ultimately, your production department's cost only will go to the product cost. So third step is reapportionment. Third step is reapportionment. Reapportionment means now you will reapportion this department and this department cost back to the production departments. Because ultimately service department is not the department of which cost will be added to the product cost. We add always production overheads to the product cost, correct? Yesterday we discussed it, and these are non-production overheads. So what we will do, we will reapportion the non-production overheads. So we will reapportion these non-production overheads back to the production department. And how do we do it? We have already studied this in our earlier sessions, wherein I think though not much needed in detail here, but there are different methods by which we do reapportionment. Okay, so we will reapportion these overheads back to the production department. And then finally, the fourth step is for absorption. Okay, why I'm telling you here, because I think you should be well aware of how the overheads get absorbed when there are multiple departments and not just the production department. Ultimately, when the cost, all the overhead costs have gone into these production departments, now these overheads will be allocated to the products, or now these overheads will be absorbed by the products in the OAR. So this OAR was basically the last step. I hope everybody is able to get hold of it. Everybody is able to understand it. Any challenges anywhere, please tell me in the chat box. Anywhere. Clear? Now I'll take you back to the Excel, take even more examples, and let's do an illustration also to be absolutely clear about it. Okay, let's proceed. So as I've told you, this overhead overhead absorption process into the product cost is not just a one-step process, it's a four-step process where we have allocation, apportionment, reapportionment, and finally absorption. Let's look at it in detail. So allocation, when I say overheads that relate to only one cost center, they are charged directly to it. Cost center is the smallest unit. Okay, cost center is the smallest unit to which the overheads are allocated. Okay, so for example, the production departments, for example, the service department, so like the employee's salary, we allocate to the accounting department, HR department, marketing department, and so on. So it can be a department, it can be a function, it can be a unit within the company. Okay, but see, basically cost center means it is that department, that function or unit that is contributing to the cost for a company, but they may not be contributing to revenue or profit generation. Like we allocate cost to an accounting department. Okay, so it contributes to the cost, but it may not be directly relating to generation of revenue. Okay, I hope you all are with me on this. So now I have already given the definition also here, just to be very, very clear for all of you. A location, function, or an equipment, item, or a unit where the costs are collected, like for example, production department. Okay, so like for example, production department, canteen, service department, that we have taken the example in our case also. Now apportionment, when the overheads, so first you have identified the different departments, and your task is basically to allocate the overheads to those departments. That is, for example, if a machine that belongs only to department A, its maintenance cost is allocated only to department A and will not be allocated to department B. Makes sense, right? So now what you have done, you have allocated the overheads to the respective departments. Now going to step 2, apportionment. Apportionment means now the overheads are allocated to multiple cost centers. But now we are going to make the groups of the cost centers. Okay. So the question here is, how would you apportion the overheads? For example, we have an overhead called rent, rate, and heating. Now the question is, how would you allocate it? Yeah, how would you allocate this rent, rate, and heating to the different departments? So let's have the most logical base, which is floor area. Again, now How would you allocate supervision and canteen expenses on the basis of number of employees? How would you allocate depreciation insurance on the basis of the value of the plant and machinery? So these are some of the bases that we use to apportion the overheads to the respective groups that we have created. Now, reapportionment, like we discussed, what was reapportionment? Bringing the service department cost to the production departments. Okay, reapportioning these costs to the production departments. And why we are doing it? Because we need to absorb these overheads to the product cost, and only the production overheads can be apportioned or can be absorbed to the product cost. See, logical? You should have this logical flow in your mind. Okay, so let's see here. Reapportionment is like service departments like maintenance, HR, canteen that don't produce the goods directly. So these costs must be reapportioned back to the production department, because I'm sure now you all know, because it's only the production department overheads that would be absorbed by the product cost. So hence we need to bring down everything to production department. Okay, the different ways by which we can reapportion is on the basis of direct labor hour, machine hours, parts handle, variable overheads used, and so on. So that depends upon what is the basis that we are using. Finally, we will absorb them into the overheads based on your OAR and calculating the cost per unit. Different ways of absorbing them. We have done it in our previous class yesterday. I'm sure you all know, either on the basis of direct labor hour rate, even we do it on the basis of direct material cost also. In the proportion of direct material cost, sometimes your question may be asking you, we do it also in the proportion of direct labor cost. We also do it in the ratio of machine hours. Okay, any questions so far? So here I've just created a brief flow of absorption costing. So that these things are absolutely crystal clear in your head. That is, your production department overheads are finally are being reapportioned from the different production departments. So basically, this is your initial level. You have the production overheads that are allocated, apportioned, reapportioned to production department A and B, and reapportioned from service department. You can see here, first the overheads got allocated here and then they got reapportioned here. Okay, finally these product department cost, product A and production department B, finally they go to the product cost, and from these product cost, then we calculate what is basically production cost, and here we add direct cost to get the total cost. Okay, so then by adding the direct cost, we will get total cost. Okay, I hope I'm clear. So now you know the root: production overheads, allocation, apportionment, reapportionment, absorbed into product cost. You got these overheads. Along with this, you add direct cost to get the total cost, total production cost. We are not looking into right now non-production cost, because non-production overheads are like the period overheads. You will add them after you have calculated your production cost to get the total cost. I hope you remember the last class cost sheet. There we had discussed all these steps. Okay, my friends, any questions, any challenges? So let's have just a quick example walkthrough for these steps that I've told you, so that it's completely, absolutely clear to all of you. But so far, any questions, then please ping in the chat box. Everybody put your queries in the chat box and I shall take it. Okay, then I think let's go ahead and let's have this example walkthrough to better understand these pointers. Okay, so this is a simple illustration that I've created so that it is absolutely crystal clear in your mind. Let's go to step 1, step 2, step 3, and just apportionment, reapportionment, and absorption. A very bird's eye view I'm taking here. Now look here. Suppose I've just taken one overhead which is 1 lakh, which is rental. Okay, I've taken the rental overhead expense which is 1 lakh here. The total floor area of the factory is 10,000 square feet. Department A uses 4,000 square feet. Department B uses 3,000 square feet. Service department uses 3,000 square feet. So in total we have 4 plus 3, 7 plus 3, 10,000 square feet. Okay, now let's take it further here. Step 1. Step 1 is you will do apportionment. But what are you going to apportion? You're going to apportion your overheads, which in here is your rent. Just 1 minute. Okay, now, so how would you apportion the rental expense, rental overhead expense to the 3 departments, Department A, Department B, which are the 2 production departments? I will list it down here. These 2 are production department and this is the service department. Okay, so we will apportion it to the 3 departments, Department A, B and service department based on the ratio of their floor areas. Okay, now let's discuss it. So now Department A is using 4,000 by 10,000 square feet. So it will have an apportionment of 4,000 by 10,000 multiplied by the total overhead 1 lakh. And we get here Department A's overhead apportionment and respective share of Department A being 40,000. For Department B, it will be 30,000. How? Again, let's repeat. 3,000 divided by 10,000, that is the proportionate area, and multiplied by 1 lakh. Okay, and we get here 30,000. Okay, now we will have Department B 30,000. 3,000 divided by 10,000, that is 3 divided by 10 multiplied by 1 lakh, and we get 30,000. Absolutely clear. Going forward, get the respective share for service department also, which is same 3,000. So we will get here 30,000. Check the totals. 40 plus 30 is 70 plus 30 is 1 lakh. Clear? Step 2. You have done the apportionment. Now let's go to reapportionment. Reapportionment means you will allocate this service department overhead to the respective Department A and Department B based on how much are they using these services. Okay, let's say we have taken an assumption that service cost is shared by the departments in the ratio of the labor hours. Is the labor hour data given to me? No, that I have not taken. So I will write here Department A is using 60% of the total time and Department B is using 40% of the total time. So in this ratio, can we allocate this service department overhead to the different production departments? Yes, ma'am, we can do it. Let's do it. So now we have 30,000 multiplied by 60%, 18,000 for Department A, 30,000 multiplied by 40%, 12,000 for Department B. We have done the reapportionment. Now add this with Department A and add this with Department B. So now when we absorb the overheads, the total overheads of Department A is 40 plus 18, which is 58,000. For department B, 30 plus 12, which is 42,000. Now we will absorb it into the products based on the machine hour or the labor hour as it is deemed fit. Any questions now? Are you absolutely clear with the flow that how absorption costing typically works? In any confusions, any questions, please put up in the chat box. Okay, now I think we can go further and let's understand one of the most hot topics that I think every student really wants to look into the detail is ABC costing. So let's have in detail understanding of this ABC costing. Okay, now let's go to the notes and first understand that what is ABC about, what do we do here, and why at the first place ABC got evolved. Okay, so let's have an example. What used to happen earlier? I'm talking about 1950s, 1940s, 1960s, that scenarios when the entities were typically very majorly labor intensive, and the amount of products that they used to manufacture, because they had the limitation of being labor intensive, was less as compared to today's world. So what used to take place is, let's say in that period the entity used to make products let's say product 1, product 2, product 3, product 4, okay, or product 5. So for them to allocate the overheads based on only the limitation of the number of products was not very difficult. Okay, but nowadays when we have such complex business processes, production processes, and we have now overheads being more than even the direct cost. So what used to happen here in 1950s, generally your direct cost was more than the overhead cost. Right, but now if I talk about 2025, even if the company is making products, let's say I go with the same products without any changes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, what do you observe here is that direct cost is generally less than the overhead cost. So your direct cost is generally less than the overhead cost. Now you say, ma'am, why are you discussing this point here? I want to tell you that nowadays overhead is one of the most substantial cost when it comes to the costing of a product. So what does it implies? It implies that people now overhead allocation just on the basis of a single rate. What we calculate here is OAR, which is a single rate, right? And this single rate we also refer to as single blanket rate. We wear blanket, 4 people under 1 blanket. That's possible, right? Here also what you're doing, all products, they get the share of overheads by a single rate. Okay, so let's have an example here. Let's say product, we have a very huge factory it has got rental expenses. Product 1 is using only 10% of the rental space. Product 5 is using 60% of the rental space. Okay, but you know what? Product A is manufacturing maximum units and product 5 is manufacturing least units. So you'll say, ma'am, what is the matter? Even if they're making the least units, boss, what happens in OAR? What happens in absorption costing? We absorb the product cost into these costs, right? We absorb the overhead cost into the product cost based on the rate, and that rate gets multiplied to the number of units. So more the number of units a product is manufacturing, more is the cost allocated to it. And less is the number of units that the product is manufacturing, less is the share of overheads given to it. Is it fair in this case? No. Is it fair? You will say no, ma'am, because ideally rental expenses, the rental space is used only 10% by product 1, and just because it is manufacturing maximum number of units, why it should be bearing the brunt of having all the cost allocated to it? It is facing the heat, right? It is facing the brunt, and that is very unfair. So to remove all this unfairness, we have this ABC here. So ABC is expensive to apply because it really needs thoughtful people. It really needs some intelligent brains to, look into the different factors. And so ABC is expensive. ABC is complex to apply. But the benefit of ABC is the departments, like here in this case, if department 1 is using only 10% of the space, then department 1 will be getting the share of only 10% of rent. It will not get a share of more than this. So it is such practical approach and such, perfect way of allocating the overheads. That is why we call it as a modern technique. Okay, we don't call it as a traditional technique. Now I hope you know why we call this as a traditional technique, because it was always based on the assumption that labor cost is more and your overhead cost is less. Your direct cost is more and overhead cost is not very huge. Hence, even if you apply a single rate to all the products, that would do. But that is not holding in today's terms, when everything we do is like marketing, advertisement, social media and everything. Right? So then we need huge amount of money, and that is certainly a part of overheads. I know what you're thinking when you're looking at it. Me. When I say YouTube, when I say marketing. But yes, that is the need of the day. Okay. Anyways, let's go further. So now direct cost is less than the overhead cost, and hence we need a more modernized method of allocating the overhead. So that is why your ABC came into picture. Activity-based costing. Activity-based costing. The term is activity. So what is activity-based costing? You will simply, the story is very simple. You have got overheads with you. Categorize the overheads. Don't say my overhead is 1 lakh. See what are the different subgroups of these overheads. Okay, what are the different subgroups of these overheads? Like rental, like material handling, like, inspection, product scheduling, and so many other overheads. Make a group of those overheads. So what we do in ABC costing, ABC method, I will just put it in a very, very, very simple way so that you can never forget this in your life. Never. Okay, so that is, I am discussing about the steps in activity-based costing. Always remember activities. So first step is makes detail of overheads. It's a very informal steps that I'm giving you, okay? Make details of overheads. That means the subdivision of overheads into multiple heads. For example, the total overhead for the year is 2 lakhs. Divide it. How much is for setup, machinery setup, how much is for rent, how much is for electricity, how much is for supervisor's salary, and so on. Make these groups. Second, identify which we also call as activities. Okay, second is identify the different cost drivers. Now you will say, ma'am, we know the cab drivers, okay, but we don't know what is the cost driver. So what is the cost driver? What does a cab driver does? Cab driver also drives your cab, right? And what is the cost driver doing? He's driving your cost. So those factors, those you can say, yes, those factors that drive the cost are the cost drivers. For example, what drives the rent? How would you apportion the rent? Based on floor space? How would you apportion the machine setup cost? Based on the machinery value? How would you apportion the production runs? Based on the production run cost? Based on the number of production runs? So these are the different drivers that drive the cost. That means these are the different bases on which you will allocate the cost. Simple. So this requires mind, right? First of all, you need your knowledge to be applied to allocate the overheads into different groups, different activities. Then you have to assign them their respective cost drivers. You can even assign common cost drivers to them. That's completely okay. But then assigning cost drivers is also very challenging. Now for a company like as you just maybe a Google, a Meta, for example, Boeing, okay, where things look very easy to see. Okay, we can have different overheads, but you will have overheads going into many thousands. And then assigning cost drivers will require time, will require efforts, will require intelligent brains, will require money, will require all of you. All my great future ACCA professionals, they will require you. So let's have the hold of it. Okay, identify the different cost drivers that drive these costs. We just took some examples and I will also give you some comprehensive examples on it so that the moment you look at it in the exam, your brain would start, okay, this is the cost driver for it. Okay, third step. Now what you will do, you will allocate the cost to the different departments or the different products based on these cost drivers ratio. Okay, so we will calculate what is the cost per cost driver. Do this calculation. So you will get the cost per cost driver. Then fourth step is finally allocate overhead cost to the different products in the ratio of sorry, not in the ratio. So different products in the on the basis of cost drivers used by the respective products. Okay, so let's say if the product is using the cost drivers, let's say 10%, like I gave you example for product 1, and they are using the cost drivers, let's say 80%, one of the product. So then the ratio of the overhead allocation will be in that basis. And we will not apply a single blanket rate. I mean, it's so good that each product will get the share on the basis of their actual usage, irrespective of the fact that what is the units that they are manufacturing. Okay, so everything will be done for a per unit basis. Very interesting, right? Okay, so now I hope these steps are clear. Any questions, any challenges, quickly put up in the chat box. Okay. Okay. So now I think we are good to go. Let's discuss more. Guys, put up your queries in the chat box. Or should I assume everything is getting absolutely 100% crystal clear in your mind? So that's terrific. Okay, let's move forward, and I think let's discuss a bit of more theory portions. See, I've given you the summary of the entire ABC. Now let's go further and let's discuss more of the theory angle, more of the steps, more of the different, cost drivers allocations that we can do, what are the bases that we can use, what are the benefits of ABC and why it is so beneficial than traditional costing. Though we have covered it here in the discussion, but I think let's go with the notes to understand them even more better way. Okay, so I'll take you to these capsule notes. Okay, anyone who wants to get access of these capsule notes, you can put it in the chat box, your email IDs, and I would share these notes away with you. Okay. Now, so the first pointer is why ABC was developed at all. I mean, why it was developed like we discussed. Let's look at the main pointers. ABC was a very traditional system, very old system. It, however, worked well in past because generally the products were very few. Okay, generally the products were very few. Products were generally homogeneous, processes were very similar, so the overheads were almost similar to all the products. And all products generally consumed overheads in the similar way. We never had such mismatch. Okay, because everything was very simple. Production processes were simple. There was not much complexity, not much competitiveness, because now we just had few big players in the market, that's all. But now we have a lot of players in the market thanks to these virtual platforms as well. Okay, then overheads were very small as compared to direct labor, which I'm sure now you can relate to. The pointer that we have already covered in our discussion. So using direct labor hours to spread overhead was fine because that time the entities were majorly labor intensive. Okay, so majorly the entities were labor intensive. So allocating of the overheads was perfectly fine based on direct labor hours. But now we have modern business challenges, which I'm sure you all can relate to, like we have discussed. Nothing is easy in today's world, right? Selling a pencil is also difficult in today's world because there's so much of competitiveness, and so just relying on your labor intensiveness won't do. Relying on only making the product very good and beautiful will not do. You have to market this product. So you have to come on YouTube Live to sell this product. Correct? I hope all of you can agree with me and can correlate with me. Okay, let's be here now in ABC. So now we know that in modern world things are different. Why? Because number one, you have advanced manufacturing technologies, AMT in place, which is much more complex, much more technologically advanced and much more bigger than what used to be earlier the processes. So overall your overhead portion is much more bigger than the direct cost. Okay, and now direct labor is very less as compared to your machine cost, as compared to the other overhead cost, and hence using just a blanket rate to allocate the overheads doesn't make sense. Okay, and doesn't really gives you the purpose of allocating the overheads. So it's better to have a better base. And the major thing, what is this I've added here just to tell you what is actually a problem with overheads. Okay, what is the problem with overheads? The problem with overheads are generally not every overhead can be related to volume or cannot be just allocated on the basis of direct labor hours and machine hours only. For example, rent. You cannot allocate it on the basis of direct hours and machine hours because that's a wrong criteria. For example, your machine setup. For example, your production scheduling. Production scheduling will be based on number of production runs. Okay, your inspections again cannot be based just on the basis of machine hours and labor hours. So due to these complexities, we have to use multiple bases. We have to use multiple bases to ensure that the products get their due share of the overheads and on a reasonable and logical basis. Not just any basis we are using to allocate it. Just because a product makes more units, we will give them more cost. So just what happens in your company, in your organization, an employee who does more work, a better work, he is overloaded with work. And there are some people who are just roaming around and having 10 cups of coffee in a day and they enjoy their life. Okay, so that the other person feels, why am I doing the other work? So the same story here. So that overloading should not take place in your office also. Inform your manager. And that should not take place here also when we allocate the overheads. Make a note of it. Okay, now going further, guys, any pointers? Okay. Why is ABC in place? Now you know the reason. Actual activities. So now we are allocating the overheads to the actual activities that are linking them, that are driving them, and not relating to the production volume or the hours on a random basis. We are linking them to the actual activities, actual hours, actual drivers, and not just any random basis. So let's take an example. And here I'm taking this example just to show you where the traditional costing method is lacking. Okay, just to know where it is lacking, let's have these examples in place. So let's talk about the high volume product like standard chair. Standard chair, that plastic standard chair that you find in every organization, that product. Okay, now it is made in bulk. It is simple in design and it needs very little support. So traditional costing basically says gets charged with too much of overhead. Why? Because it is high volume product. So it will be charged with too much of overheads. Although you will say that, ma'am, there will be cost optimization because production is made huge in number. So overall overhead cost per chair should fall, right? Because overheads are fixed generally, or there is a portion of variableness also. But overall the overhead per chair should fall rather than rising. And here we'll have rising overheads. The reason being overall units produced are more. Now when I say low volume product like designer chair, ideally designer chair will consume more overheads. Why? It needs more specification, it has more complexities, more designing, okay, more than the normal chair. Okay, setup, inspection, everything will be more. But just because it is having low units, just because it is having low volume production, okay, as per traditional costing, as per your absorption costing, it will have too little overhead. Such is the mismatch which is not acceptable. So therefore, charges, the cost should be on the basis of actual activities rather than just a blanket rate to make it more accurate. Right? I hope I'm clear. So now if I summarize activity based costing, I can simply put up as activity based costing aims to identify the activities which will cost overhead cost to be incurred. That is, what are the cost drivers? So okay, so we will identify here cost drivers, and then we will apportion the overhead cost on the to the product cost based on the use of these activities by each product. That is, based on the cost drivers that are driving this cost. Okay, so based on that logical basis only, we will allocate these overheads to the each of the products. Right? I hope I'm clear. Okay, so here I've just given you some examples so that things become very, very, very clear to all of you. And that is, what is a cost driver? First, let's understand it. Cost driver is the factor or that any push, any factor which is influencing the cost, or on which is having an influence on the cost of the activity. Activity is having the rentals expenses, activity is having the production runs, activity is having the machinery setup, activity is having the loading unloading, activity is having the material handling, activity is the inspections. So all these activities related overheads will be allocated to the product cost on the basis of the factor that has most influence, on the cost of that activity. Okay, so we will always see. Now this is very difficult in your practical world, let me tell you, to understand which factor has most influence on that activity. So understanding that influence making factor or that cost driver is very difficult. Okay, so now please look at my screen. All of you, are you with me? Any questions, any doubts? Okay, then let's take it here. So I've given you 4 examples. Production setup cost. What is the cost driver? Number of production setups. Nothing given, number of production runs. Machine oil and machine hour repairs relating to machine. So best cost driver is number of machine hours. Supervisor salary. Best cost driver will be labor hours because supervisor is the labor. Ordering cost or handling customer orders. Best cost driver will be number of orders. Because in your exam, the question will not specify these are the cost drivers. Okay, it will not be given as a cake on the plate. You have to cut the cake, think, and then put it on the plate. That means you have to think of the cost drivers, my friends. Now, material handling cost is number of production runs. Okay. Okay, so I just summarize these steps here so that anyways you don't forget it. After these steps, first we will do a question so that we are absolutely in line with ABC and absorption costing. Okay, let's have this. So I've just summarized it in the form of a flowchart. So what are the steps, people? We have done that steps, right? Let's have a recap. Which is the first step? Identifying the major activities that are creating the cost. Okay, identifying the different activities. I'm sorry. First step is identifying the activities. Right? You identify the major activities which create the cost. So based on which you will divide your overheads into different categories. Second is creating the cost pools. What is cost pools? Cost pools is just, you are grouping up the cost. Let's say I have in relation to rent only 4 types of rent. Now I cannot have separate rent shown separately. I will group them together. Okay, so grouping of the cost is the cost pool, creation of cost pool. Second, just 1 minute. It has gone into that invisible mode of Mr. India. Okay, so let it come back. Now it has come back. Okay, now the second is creating the cost pools. Okay, third is determining the cost drivers. Now we know about it. We have spoken a lot about it. This I have summarized so that everything is at one place. No, things will become very easy for you. Okay, next, calculating the rates. So just like we used to calculate OAR, guys, remember Just like we used to calculate OAR, overhead absorption rate. Okay, here also we will have OAR, but now specific to the different overheads and based on their cost drivers. Not just applying machine hours on the entire overheads. No, we will have specific to their cost drivers. So everybody be with me. Okay, finally based on these rates, you multiply the cost driver for each individual product and you will be able to assign cost. And then you have got the total cost, but my story doesn't end here because what I told you, we need cost sheets based on per unit cost. So divide it by the number of units to get the per unit cost. Guys, I'm giving you 20 seconds. Put up in the chat box for any questions so far. Any questions? Come on, quickly, let's have your viewpoints. In your capsule, you will find these detailed steps also just to add on, right? Just to aid your understanding. You will get all of these in your notes. So what are you waiting for? Ping in your email address and I will send you notes and share those notes with you. Okay, now I think we can do a question so that we have utmost clarity. Let's have the question. Just give me 1 minute. Okay, let's do one thing. Let's have a break for 10 minutes. That was supposedly to be given to you after 20 minutes. Let me just fix it because sometimes these fixations take time. So let me just fix it and see you all in 10 minutes. Don't go anywhere. Let's have a break of 10 minutes and post that we will do questions. Okay, so be with me after the break.